Hello and welcome to another episode of Sports Days. This week we are going to be talking about a club that has at one point survived with a budget of 2.5 million euros. Could you possibly imagine that? That is,
Eintracht Frankfurt.
yeah, there you go. I mean, even Neymar must be earning more than 2.5 million a month.
He earns way more than that. You can be sure of.
Yeah.
But I mean, depends on when you're looking at. I think 30 years ago, 2.5 millions were quite a lot. You
Yeah,
could
it
do
is.
some with it, but in the last 10, 20 years, the budget of clubs seemed to explode, especially since the 2000s. I think Real Madrid can be seen as pioneer in
Exactly.
merchandise and marketing and trying to get out everything that's possible from your club.
From the fans,
especially
from the market.
fans, especially in the international level. They went to the Asian market, they went to different foreign markets and really introduced
The brand.
the brand.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's just jump in. Like, a lot of people have recently gotten to know who Eintracht Frankfurt is and not 10 years back or so. What could you possibly say the best word to use is, or what has revolutionized the club in such a way that now people are talking about your club?
I mean, we have somehow the potential to always come back to where we have been 30 years ago, around about 40 years ago. We have been a big thing in European football as well, not as the big clubs nowadays compared to Bayern Munich or something, but we were a known team in Europe. And I have the feeling we're coming back to this point. We stabilized the league, we progressing from year to year, and I think much of this is to be accounted through Bobic, Fredi Bobic. He was doing a crazy good job. Of course, he has his team surrounding him,
Yeah.
but he takes the main decisions, and many of the success put to him.
Yeah,
Clearly.
I mean, he also had to take tough decision after when Kovac left in 18,
Yeah.
and he did pretty good. I think he took a pretty good decision with appointing Adi Hüttl.
Hütter.
Adi
Adi
Hütter.
Hütter.
And yeah, so and also his philosophy of making transfers. I mean, of course, everything goes through him, and I think we could possibly say that Frankfurt has just revolutionized the transfer market in such a way that now the other clubs are also following suit in a way that clubs are buying on a 2 year or a 1 year deal
Yeah.
or a 1 year loan deal, and then possibly seeing, okay, does this player suit our identity? Does he suit our playing style? And then we could possibly make this into a permanent player with the likes of Jovic, Rebic.
First of all, I would be happy that if all this started with Frankfurt and that we revolutionized the whole transfer market. I think it's rather the progress you can see development you have just in the market. Can see this kind of transfer strategies in several leagues and several clubs because it just makes it on one hand easier because you have more possibilities in without using all your transfers, your financial backgrounds. But I have to say they did a perfect job there. They really adapted from year to year, and something even if maybe not fine to talk about it, but Leipzig did it as well. This adaptation from year to year, what are to see what are my possibilities, what is my budget I can work with, and what is missing for the team to create a spirit within the team that works. Where you have young players, old players, you have players they want to show themselves. Maybe they haven't been on the level that they can be. For example, Rebic or Jovic, they were, especially Rebic, he was playing for I think Leipzig before or something.
Okay.
He tried it out on loan and he failed a bit. And till now, everybody knows that knows Rebic
Yeah.
that he can be a difficult player.
Yeah, potential.
But he has a crazy high potential, and you just have to know how to use these players in a way, or use is the wrong word maybe, but how you can integrate them
Yeah.
to maximize the success you have within your team. And I think that is something that we really did very very good. Of course, there is some kind of idea behind of this. If you look at the squad that Frankfurt has and has had in the last 5 years under Bobic, then you can clearly see that you have in the international team, you always have some kind of bridges as well. So if you get a Brazilian player or if you get a Portuguese player, you have Brazilian players. So the Portuguese helps other players to integrate. If you have some players that have been playing, for example, Haller, he's a French guy. Now he's playing for Cote d'Ivoire, I think.
He switched nationalities.
Yeah, he switched, not switched, but he chose the other nationality as the chances for him are higher. I mean, if you look at the squad depth for France, then you can't blame him. But I think that's one of the smartest moves they have made here. You can always, if you look at the squad, you can always see that some kind of groups are built in a way that you always have 2 to 3 players coming from Japan. You have 2 to 3 players come from Serbia with Rebic. So you always have the bridges between the certain nationalities, and which makes it easier for them to integrate and as well for them to show their potential, because the mental part, feeling good part of what's behind it and what's very important, they manage to give the player this kind of confidence. And I think that's one of the major KPIs.
Glad you brought the comparison between Leipzig and Frankfurt, which now it is easy for me to like transition into my question, which I want to ask. So what is exactly the club culture, the club philosophy in terms of not just players, but also with coaches? Because before Kovac, there were a lot of ins and outs with coaching and management.
Yeah, some years, I would say like 5 to 10 years after Friedhelm Funkel left, there was some kind of uncertainty and some downgrades partially, and it resulted into the relegation we had in the season 11-12, no, 10-11 and 11-12 we played in second division. But especially afterwards, you could see that there was a clear progress along the line, and we really got back to our identity, got back to what we're standing for as Frankfurt. And
what exactly is your identity?
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go now. This is one of the basic things: is fighting. Fighting, always giving 110%, never step back, and always try to win. And even if you're 3-0 down, you just have to fight and give everything. Being humble is one important thing as well. I think the connection and the identification you feel within Frankfurt, if you really live it, I think now in the last 5 years, it really gave you back the opportunity to feel this feeling. Before, these years were more or less, they were unclear, uncertain, and maybe we tried to go somewhere that's not really us. So I think we got back to our roots, but hardworking, always 110% on the pitch, and being humble as well.
Do you think this identity is mainly because of what the coaches bring along with them? Or where does this spirit of like fighting, giving 100% on the pitch come from? Like, of course, there are fans who's backing the team week in and week out, but through the club system, through the
I can tell it to you. I think it's players from the past. If you look at the biggest players that Eintracht Frankfurt had, most of them played for Frankfurt over a century. Jürgen Grabowski, Charlie Körbel, Bernd Nickel. They all had huge identification with Frankfurt and really felt a part of not only of the club, of the team, of the city. Everything fitted in, and I think that's something that they really recreated now, and they got to a point where they really can say, "We are Frankfurt. We stand up for something, and we can show it as well, and we can really argue with this point as something that's a clear plus for players, especially if you are in a talks and convincing a player to be able to sign them. You had always some plus and negative aspects, but nowadays I think you can truly just commit yourself on what Frankfurt stands in for, their identity, and that's mostly enough, because all this mixture that we have to offer or can offer to a player, as I told, the team chemistry you have within. You have so many different kind of international influences, and all this goes in line with the city of Frankfurt. So if we go away from the club and just look at the city itself, you still have a very international city. Frankfurt is the financial capital, not only of Germany, you have it of Europe. So that's why we're attracting many international companies as well as people. And on top of that, Frankfurt, what is maybe not known to many, Frankfurt has a very high connection to this honest, working, and hard-working inhabitants and philosophy that's deeply rooted into Frankfurt's culture.
Do you think, like, in spite of being like this financial capital where everything seems to be like big multinational corporates. The special essence of this city is like no matter how humongous it is in terms of like cashing in and cashing out, due to it being the financial capital of Europe, it's also a very working class society.
Yeah, yeah.
And why is that? Because
if you go to Frankfurt, I can tell you an example. If you go to Frankfurt, the banking district, the financial district, is pretty close to the main station, and directly next to this financial district, you have the party district. You have as well all the prostitutes. You have to mention it. It all belongs to Frankfurt, and it's directly next to each other. So the point is, if I was going out in Frankfurt, I went to a club, and you could really see the drug addicts partying right next to the guys that are earning thousands of euros weekly,
yeah,
and they're enjoying a club
together,
and they're
there's no
increasing,
high and low in society.
exactly, and they're increasing their fun as well, because diversity is something that's important, I think, to not important, but they're very open-minded towards it. And so I think this culture goes along with what in Frankfurt stands in for and what the club stands in for, and which values are there and given. And I think that's the thing. What I was saying, going back to the roots, having this international team and having this international participants from every culture that just gives you some kind of reintegration with the city and what's the
But are you also trying to say that the roots itself was diversity and not like a singular identity back in the day? What do you how are you planning to connect like the roots and diversity together?
Yeah, there was something that came up. I think firstly it really was big with Anthony Yeboah, or Tony Yeboah, who was one of the biggest African players of all time, and he was the first African player, I think, who was even playing in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, for Frankfurt at least, yeah.
And so there it really started, because I think African players to that time, even if it was 40 years ago, wasn't a very big thing. And this whole identification and internationalization got a different or a bigger meaning to the club. But I would say Frankfurt has always been an open-minded city. It always has been some city for workers and trying to give something back to the community.
Yeah.
And this part shouldn't be undervalued.
I guess unity in diversity, yeah, and that's why the name Eintracht comes from there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Frankfurt United, I guess. But I have to come back to Adi Hutter and basically ask you, like, or maybe just to trigger you, or maybe it would not trigger you at all. But who do you think has, in the last 5 years, or in the last 4 years rather, has had a bigger influence on the football club? Is it Adi Hutter or is it Nico Kovac? Of course, one thing doesn't happen because of the other. So there had to be a Nico Kovac for Adi Hutter to take Frankfurt to the semi-finals of the Europa League. But who's had a massive influence? It's also a very unfair question, because if there was no Kovac, again, I'm getting back to the point. If there was no Kovac, then you'd probably be in the second division. And if there was no Hutter in this case, there would have been no Europa League semi-finals. But who's to say? But
I mean, it's hard to get an opinion. If we would look at this hypothetical and say, okay,
I mean, hindsight is a beautiful thing, so let's just dive into.
We should see, think of maybe having Adi Hutter as in the years of where Nico Kovac was, and Nico Kovac in the years where Adi Hutter is, and see, maybe if I think of having the same success, then it would be the same value, but it's very hard to say there, as Nico Kovac was there firstly, and he went through all these hard times, the building up that you have in the team. We talked about the budget you have had with Frankfurt only being 2.5 million, so you had to be very creative. And you didn't have these many talents coming up from the youth team, so it wasn't like other teams, for example, Schalke 04 in Germany, who always have a very, very prolific youth team. So I think in general it's hard to say. It would be unfair to say Adi Hutter is not doing a crazy good job, but at this point, I have to say Nico Kovac set the foundation of where we are now. He took the team through the hardest times and increased their value, made every player better, and he worked with much harder conditions than Adi Hutter did. On the other hand, Adi Hutter now has different expectations going towards him because of the foundation that Nico Kovac set as well, and he's fulfilling them quite good. And we were at the final again, DFB Pokal.
Yes.
we lost it, sadly. But all in all, especially looking at the last 5 years, maybe even at the last 8 years since we're in first division again, I can see a clear progress, much to do with the replacement of Heribert Bruchhagen with Fredi Bobic. I think Bruchhagen wasn't the right person for Frankfurt, as we can maybe see with his move to HSV. After he went there, they weren't this good to say it polite. So I think that was one of the main things, because if you really want to change something within your club, within your identity, and want to get some really new in Germany you say frischer Wind, so like a fresh wind inside of it, then you need to have some kind of change at the top. So because this influences all the parts going down, like water flowing downwards and not upwards. Same it is with the football clubs. I think if you really want to change something, you have to start on the top of it, and then all the mechanisms can be followed. That was one of the main things, and from there on, Fredi Bobic did really good decisions. We talked about the coaches that he got for the club, as well as the staff he has around him. He can rely on everybody. Hübner is somebody he's really working with him together, and his colleague Ben Manga, responsible for transfers and scouting. Ben Manga is seen as one of the most important workers you have behind Bobic, because the trust is there. They can rely on each other. They're trusting each other, and it works.
Yeah,
it works totally.
Yeah.
Ben Manga, he's as well has this international aspect as well, with which contributes to the whole picture that we as Frankfurt want to stand in for. And I think with having only German people that work for you, you cannot really honestly sell yourself as an international club. You have to somehow be seen. You have to somehow find these structures within your club and within your workers. And I think that's something that we can really see not only in the team, you can see it in the normal working area there as well, in every department, and that's totally within the whole philosophy that we try to introduce.
Yeah, so of course we spoke about the philosophy of the club, the culture of the city. Let's just a little brief dive into the crest of Eintracht Frankfurt, the eagle called Attila, and also like a couple of other nicknames, SGA, and what's the other one?
Launische Diva.
Yeah, Launische Diva. Why Launische Diva? I can already, like, the first time I read it, I got a hint of what it might mean, but why don't you explain?
I mean, you could see us in some way as the Robin Hood of German football. That's the thing that I think the Launische Diva was created in the 70s or something like that. Nowadays, you don't use the expression Launische Diva anymore this often, but you still know the stigma which goes along with the Frankfurt is that we play good against the good teams, we play bad against the worst teams. So yeah, the Robin Hood syndrome I talked about. Luckily, we stabilized with that more and more within the last years, but historically and still up to today, it's something we have. As we see in playing 3-3 against Gladbach, they went through the group stage of Champions League. They landed before Inter Milan, before Shakhtar Donetsk in this group, shortly after Real Madrid. So they nearly won the group, and we were able to win this long time. But we didn't. Then we have, like, I think out of 13 games, 14 games, we only won 2, I think, or something. We only won 2 games. We drawed 7 times or 8 times, and only lost 2 times. So at the moment we're having some consistency, not in the way we like to have it, but I mean, you can see the negative aspect of that, you can see the positive aspect of that as well, that we always have a chance whom we're playing against, Gladbach or is it Dortmund. It doesn't matter, even the best teams of the league. We don't think of the 5-0-5 we had against Bayern Munich at the beginning of the season. That was like a exception. Still can happen sometimes, but I think losing this high amount to Bayern Munich, you can't blame any team.
No.
If Bayern Munich is really having a good day, it doesn't matter which team. We've seen it last year with Barcelona. they really can just
tear you apart,
roll over them, take every team apart.
So what's the history behind, like, having the eagle as the symbol in the crest?
Yeah, the eagle is a the badge, the sign of Frankfurt, the city of Frankfurt. I think the background is somewhat because of the Adler. So it has just a big historical connection. And so the city of Frankfurt was connected to the eagle. And as the connection between the club and the city of Frankfurt is very big as well, as I told, the philosophy that we have within the city always should go aligned, or we try to keep it aligned within the team. So that's the main reason we have the eagle as well as our.
It is also one of the only two clubs to have like a live, can you say mascot, or like a like a real animal to be integrated in the club.
So the realization of the mascot, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cologne with Hannes and we, with our eagle Attila, are the only two. We have Attila since 2006 because back then we wanted to have some identification of what we're standing within, and this was the perfect way to do that. If you look at Cologne, you have Hannes, that's the goat. even if Cologne is not known as the GOAT team, there are some other teams that are standing in for that, mostly where Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi play.
Mm-hmm.
They introduced this tradition many centuries ago, not centuries, decades, but decades ago with the GOAT that they always have there. And even when one GOAT has been dying, they replaced him with a new Hannes. Yeah, I don't want to think of, but I think we will have the same procedure. But let's don't think about anybody dying. I think the best is always to stay positive.
Also, Hertha Berlin, of course, they don't have a mascot per se, but they are looking after a polar bear that's at Deer Park. And
they have him already.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was Knut. I think his name is Knut.
No, his name is Hertha.
Hertha?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought before they had Knut. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And then everything, like, it's looked after the club and stuff like that. But anyways, I'm against the concept.
For me, that's kind of bullshit. We're living in Germany and having a polar bear as the animal that should represent your club identity or philosophy, even if it's just a mascot.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. It's a mascot, but like they just thought that okay, we will like sponsor one animal in the zoo.
Yeah.
So they just got, I think, the polar bear, and then they named after him. Anyway, moving on. Coming to my favorite part of this, like when I do these interviews, I am really intrigued and interested into getting to know why certain, like my friends in your case, or certain people support a club that doesn't win a lot, but also you have taken this, or you've made the decision to choose to support this club through your entire life. And I want to come back to asking you, how did your commitment towards Eintracht come, and also how did you happen to become a fan? I think once last year you told me that you supported Bayern Munich at some point in time, and then you support Eintracht now, which I think that I was pretty happy to hear.
Like all these talks can backfire as well, so I have to be careful about that. No, I'm totally honest with you with that. In my family, there was no big interest in football. Only my uncle was a football fan, a quite big one, and he was supporting Bayern Munich. But I never had this big connection to him, so I wouldn't say that my connection to Bayern Munich was coming because of him. I was just a big football fan. I loved to watch football. I loved to play football, and it grew over time because I was watching every weekend, Bundesliga, all the results, everything that happened. When going to my father's place at the weekend, he mostly did his thing, and we kind of entertained us on ourselves. So watching football every Saturday or Sunday, the highlights then was something that I was really looking forward to. And to that time, you can just open up your laptop and look it up online, because mostly you didn't have a laptop. And secondly, there was an internet connection. So yeah, looking up the highlights every Sunday was a big thing to that time in Germany, because you didn't have these many opportunities to watch the highlights. So yeah, and just grew with me. Like you mentioned, Bayern Munich was the team of my childhood. I was always having a good view on Eintracht Frankfurt, and I really liked them. But yeah, it was as well as the city of Frankfurt. There was always something that was so rural, so natural, that was kind of too much for me. or
With
it was overwhelming some way.
with Frankfurt?
Yeah, with Frankfurt, it was something that was so overwhelming for me because yeah, I could really feel this tradition behind of it, this identification. And to say I'm supporting Eintracht Frankfurt, there was much more belonging to it than me just saying I'm like Eintracht Frankfurt. So because of this whole big expectations we have towards the tradition, which I see much higher than Bayern Munich's, because most of the connection you have nowadays with Bayern Munich, I don't want to
Typecast.
diminish. I don't want to diminish what they're achieved in the past. They're the biggest club by far in Germany, but that's exactly why I think many people and the biggest fan base is coming from the success they have and the constant success they're having within the last 50 years. And having such a loyal and big fan base like Eintracht Frankfurt with not winning any titles for nearly 30 years. If we forget the 2018 Pokal win there, I think 30 years more or less they didn't have any
Yeah, they didn't win between 88 to 2018. So,
yeah, exactly. So to achieve this kind of loyalty within your fans and within the city, you have to have some bigger view on how things work and what you're standing in for and what you stand up for as a club. The identity is some big thing I was there talking about.
Yeah, you said that you were kind of overwhelmed by how much they're identifying with their culture, and it was so rurally raw for you.
Yeah.
And at that point, you were a Bayern Munich supporter. But then, what happened? Like, what changed, and how did you transition between this all-conquering club to a club that is still like trying to find its way in the Bundesliga? Because I think when did you switch loyalties? If that is the right way.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like something I want to mention as well is that I just have the regional big contact to Frankfurt as well, which of course made it attractive for me to like Frankfurt, but as well, like I said, the raw and rural and the tradition that was all very overwhelming for me made it hard as well. Because yeah, I had the Frankfurt fans in contact with me, mates from the school, some other guys. So that was like a big step where I said, okay, I can't touch it until I would say the older I got, the older I get nowadays as well, the more I feel connected to the city and to the identity, to the philosophy. When I was 18, I didn't really like to go to Frankfurt because yeah, it was just like you step out of the main station and you're directly where all the prostitutes are, more or less.
Yeah.
It just takes you 5 minutes of walking. And in this district, people are laying on the floors, having their needles directly next to them. And there are many drug addicts as well. So very honest city, and they don't try to hide anything. Coming out of the main station, normally the main station, the area around that should give you a nice introduction of to the city, etc. But coming to Frankfurt, it's a bit different, and yeah, that's something that was keeping me apart from Frankfurt somehow. But the older I got, the more confident I got as well with myself and my views on the world and what I like or not. The more I felt identified with Frankfurt, and that's maybe I think the main reason. Like my own growth got aligned with what in Frankfurt is standing up for and what I see in the world, what's important for me. I think that's the main reason. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what is important for you?
Like I wouldn't say diversity, but just being open-minded. If this leads to diversity as the world is structured, then that's what I want. I don't want to, in my view, I don't want to keep somebody small, tell anybody how he should do it, what he should do. I'm a fan of the free will. Everybody should know what they're wanting, where they want to go. Sometimes it's a hard lesson as well because many people need to have a guideline throughout their lives, and often it's very hard to find your way, and it could be easier to be guided. Many people like it. They just taken in Germany we say ins Macht den Nest setzen. So think of people. I think one of the most famous examples here is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump always showcases him as the biggest businessman in the world, but he had a huge financial background. He just took what was already there, sat into the warm nest. That's what it's told in German.
And didn't pay taxes.
And don't pay taxes, but that's another thing. And he didn't really try to break out this whole set framework. And that's something what I'm talking here about. Is that you really have to try and go new ways and be open-minded towards things. And I'm not a guy who likes to just stick to something because you're coming from it. You just have to in my opinion, always have to question what's behind of something, what goes along with it, and what is the full picture behind of it. And that's something that arose more and more in my mind. And I think nowadays that's one of the biggest reasons, as I told, why I'm supporting Frankfurt.
Hope you got a very clear insight of what he has to share. If you like what we do, you can follow us on Instagram under the handle of Sports Tales. Check us out on our weekly show, which will be out every Wednesday. And until then, stay healthy, stay awesome. Yeah, so long.